Glad to have you back. In case you're just joining us, this is This Day Live, and I am Ndi Amongo. Earlier, we told you that the World Economic Forum, which wrapped up at the weekend in Davos, Switzerland, the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, said Nigeria's delegation was not there simply to beg, but rather to seize advantage of the premise to dialogue with investors on a fair and balanced, mutually beneficial relationship. He spoke to Arise News. Let's get to hear what he said.
Honestly, I was quite impressed with the outpouring of support by the global business community, which I've come to appreciate the permanent role Nigeria plays in Africa. For the purpose of perspectives, 1 out of every 4 black men is a Nigerian. And by 2050, we are projected to be the third most populous nation on earth. We will surpass the United States. Our population will be 440 million people. By then, 1 out of every 3 black men is a Nigerian. And by the end of the century, we will be the most populous nation on earth. Certainly, this is the most populous country in Africa and its largest economy. Wherever Nigeria goes, that's where Africa goes. And the trajectory of global growth is facing Africa, and Nigeria will make or mar that destination. Our presence was well received, especially in the light of some far-reaching decisions taken by the present administration towards repositioning the economy. Oil subsidy for successive administration has been an albatross round our neck.
Well, that was Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima speaking with the Rice News anchor Ruben Abati at the just concluded World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. For a bit of an insight into some of what you just heard him say, I'm now being joined from Arise Lagos studio by Jide Ologun, a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Glad to have you join me on This Day Live, Jide. Ours is the richest continent in the world, so we've not come begging, but to deal with the world on mutually beneficial terms. So what comparative advantage can we tap into to achieve what the Vice President just said?
Thank you very much. You know, what he said are facts that are clearly known to us, that Nigeria occupies a very strategic position in the continent of Africa. And when we talk about what we stand to benefit, then we talk about attracting foreign direct investment and, of course, enjoying the partnership that is provided for in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that will be evaluated in year 2030. So I think our focus now should be to create that enabling environment that we attract the required support to reposition our economy in the right direction. You know, in the course of his address, he mentioned Mauritius, he mentioned Botswana, he mentioned Rwanda as some top African countries that are actually making progress. And you know, if you isolate Botswana, for instance, Botswana has one of the fast-growing and sustained economic development in the world. You know, since Botswana left the colonial hold of Britain in 1965-1966, Botswana has been able to sustain, you know, a growing economy and performing well. And if you look at Mauritius also, Mauritius is doing well, and Rwanda, these are African countries. So when we know that our position is strategic in the trajectory of Africa, then we need to come back and ensure that we actually portray that position. And when you talk about national businesses and economies, you need a secured environment, you need, you know, wonderful policies that will make investors in your environment, you know, be assured that they will benefit also. There will be mutual benefits. But right now, the challenge before the government is even that of keeping the investors that are within Nigeria. So to start talking about wooing more to come is a difficult one. So by now, I think we should just proactively learn from what some of the frontline countries have done to be on the path of advancement and begin to implement from home. The wise man came out to say that, charity begins at home. So it's a good thing if by now it's not about going out there to beg, but to market the opportunities and potentials of Nigeria. And if we must maximize that, then let's create what we call, an enabling business environment in public relations that will give assurance to those who are coming to invest. Definitely, Africa is a continent that investors want to patronize. I did a research, and about 40% of the global resources are domiciled in Africa. So God has been generous with us. But how do we maximize these resources? I mentioned Botswana. You go and check what they have there. And in some of this country, they focus on agriculture and eventually diversified to others, and they have kept the corruption profile low, and they are reaching out to develop their people. So I hope that on return, the vice president will also liaise with the president that right now, let's focus on what we have in subsection 2 of section 14 of the Nigerian Constitution, 1999, as amended, that clearly states that the security and the welfare of the citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. It becomes very dangerous and volatile to invest in an environment that is infested with kidnapping and different kinds of insecurity. So those are my thoughts on that for now. But he has spoken well, that we are not out there to beg. But then if we are not out there to beg, let's create the attraction back at home.
Create the attraction back at home. Jide, you talked about learning. I'm pretty sure you must have read The Richest Man in Babylon. And the idea of the president then, in quote, if he was a president or a king, was to call out card. Who knew what to do? I mean, he was a businessman. And so what he thought was get sectional leaders in various parts of the country, get them to learn from this man under his tutelage, and then let them go spread it. Why I'm saying this is that about 7-8 years back, Rwanda, private schools were asking government to please allow pupil students to come register. There, public schools are a thing. So why are we this way not picking the brains? In fact, we even have brains outside the country. Why are we not bringing them together, picking their brains, developing ours, and then taking from these people who have moved forward economically and whatever, and then, if you like, jumpstart our economy or get better and better?
I mentioned it earlier, and someone threw a challenge at me recently that is Nigeria not learning from developed countries? Then why are we not developed? And I responded that if we have been learning, by now we also should have developed. You see, we gained our political independence in 1960. We became a republic in 1963. And about 2 years later, Singapore left Malaysia as a coastal region with little resources. And between the space of 1965 and this 2024 that we are discussing right now, Singapore has developed to become one of the best countries to live and to work in the world. And basically, you don't need to travel to Singapore to learn about the transformational engagements that Lee Kuan Yew, embarked upon. You can learn about them on your palms, on your phone. You can Google. And if you don't even want to go to Singapore, you look at the United Arab Emirates, where Sheikh Zayed, succeeded in translating a desert to an earthly paradise by pragmatic engagement of challenges. I mentioned Botswana. Botswana was rated as one of the poorest states in the world, but that's not the case today. After independence, they've had their tough times. you know, and you move to Rwanda, for instance. There was a time Rwanda was almost completely wrecked by genocide. And one of the things the leader, Paul Kagame, did was to come up and say, now we have identified that ethnocentrism is destroying us. So one of the first things he did was to banish any ethnic sentiment, so that we are one, you are a Rwandan. And I can let you know that combined with some of the policies rolled out, it drew Rwanda back from the track of destruction to the track of development. And the focus on tourism, diversify the economy, you know, made it a very friendly environment for business. You know, within 72 hours in Rwanda, for instance, you can register your company, do your banking procedures, and hit the ground running in business. So, but I can see this as part of what the government is doing in Nigeria under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You know, right now you can see what is going on in the immigration service, where the procedures to have your international passport may be different from what we used to have. We expect that at the airport now, we should have a better engagement, which is less manual, you know, less contacts with human beings when you arrive the country. So there are policies that are coming up. But by and large, I still want to advise President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to focus on one thing. There is the software of development, there is the hardware of development. So when you talk about infrastructure, you talk about the superstructure. The superstructure is the human element, which is the corruption aspect of it. How do you bring the political will to make sure that these things work? And it's so easy. You look at Section 15, subsection 5 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended. It states clearly that the state shall abolish corrupt practices and abuse of office. So those who will be driving the process with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, they should know that there will be consequences if they don't fall in line. So if he has a vision to reposition Nigeria, he must be a very brilliant project director that will monitor the processes through, so that what is earmarked will give us a result that we can eye-mark. It's not what we are reading about the funds meant for COVID-19 that allegedly have been embezzled by some, messing up the central bank and things like that. So if we can do that, then we go back to the platform of the wise, which is engaging our resources to generate commonwealth for common good. Sincerely speaking, Nigeria is blessed. I mean, if the vice president stated that we've not gone out there to beg hand in cap, I agree with him. We have the resources, we have the partnership waiting. He also mentioned the population of Nigeria. You know, when you talk about Mauritius, about 1.3 million people, Botswana, it's about 2.6 or thereabout, and Rwanda is about 14.9 million people. So that they are not even, it's like a metropolitan city of Kano, and I quite agree with that. When we have over 200 million citizens. So Nigeria is a very huge market in Africa for investors. But what about the environment? What about the security of your dividends and things like that? I mean, we are still trying to sort out the funds that are locked up in the foreign exchange of airlines that have come to do business in Nigeria. If you look at it should be Botswana now. Botswana has one of the most commendable external reserves in the world. You know, they have exercised budget surpluses for several years, and that has been sustained. So how do we come to that point when we are truly business-minded? And when you talk about business, being business-minded, it's all about profiting. And who are the beneficiaries of this profiting? Of course, the citizens, not an economy that is driven hugely by going out there to borrow and squandering what we have. Permit me to say that. You know, we are still talking about illegal miners in the country right now. Why should they come and illegally mine our resources? Why should we have oil thieves? Why should we have those who will corner billions of naira from the nation and throw others into poverty?
That's why
so these are issues. Really, we must learn.
Yes, okay.
Exactly, the superstructure is quite important.
Yeah, okay. Well, he said quite a lot, and we're interrogating these things on this show. He says to rebuild trust and confidence, he says we need leaders who empathize. In this part of the world, nay Nigeria, isn't this far-fetched? Do our leaders really empathize? Someone said service is the rent we pay for the space we occupy while existing on earth. Do we really empathize? Are we humanistic in our approach to dealing with things?
You know, with the current evaluation, I would say no. And let me make reference to some of the reports I've been having. I'm one of those who came out to say palliative engagement may appear good offerings, but because of the system we have, that I didn't believe in it. And now we are reading that resources that were meant to help the vulnerable ended up in the bank account of the vulnerables. And permit me to explain. You see, when you talk about poverty, it is not he who has little that is poor, but he who is never satisfied, who does not think that his neighbors should also prosper. And that is the case we have. That is why we read about the millions and billions of naira meant for, humanitarian interventions being diverted. And when this is the case, then empathy is not on the table, because empathy means you connect with what others are going through and you do all you can to ensure that you make life meaningful for them, you reduce the pain they are going through. But when we have situations where rice that is meant for the vulnerable end up in warehouses that some will use to campaign for elections, and monies that should be given to the vulnerable end up in private accounts, then empathy is not on the table at all. And this is one of the core kernels of leadership. When you look at someone like the Lord Jesus Christ, he came to empathize, to die for sins he never committed. So it's about service. But right now in Nigeria, it's not about that. And that is why when you look out of the window, you see citizens who are really, really suffering. And you see some leaders who are fueling their flamboyant lifestyles. So we should not be the case. I mean, we are talking about our economy right now. In the same economy where it's very difficult for some to even have one-course meal, you have situations where the cost of governance in some quarters are so huge and enormous, talking about renovating, building befitting houses with billions of naira, different kinds of flamboyance and leadership. It does not in any way connect. And on that, if we are learning how we also prescribe that the government may look in the direction of Sweden, Netherlands, and even Switzerland, where the vice president is right now, and see the connection between the government and the governed, and how they've succeeded in not building walls, in building bridge, so that there can be a mutual understanding and sustained goodwill. And I want to see that happen in this government. Commendably, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came out to say the cost of the expenditure of travelings and things like that will be cut by 60%. He has come out to do that. Let's see it reflect in other areas so that we can really show to the people that, fine, we are all going through a difficult economy that we hope will translate to a better economy. But while we are passing through this tunnel, let's be on the same page. It's not that you ask me to remove my belt and remove my T-shirt, and you are flying around in, in tuxedo suits. No. Let's all be part of it. You saw what John Magufuli did in Tanzania when he came in as president. The money meant for celebrating the independence, he stopped it and said, go and invest it in the health sector. He brought down those traveling around in first class and things like that. And before he left the stage, he was able to redirect the economy and the social life of Tanzania. And the person there now, I hope, is moving in that direction. So there is a time for sacrifice. If you read Ecclesiastes chapter 3 in the Bible, it says there is time for everything.
Oh, yes.
and of course, for every purpose. So this is the time now to trim down on luxurious living and flamboyance in government and see how we can develop what to support the people, the health sector, education, electricity. I know that in Switzerland, the vice president won't come back to tell us that there was power failure. And I keep wondering why in Nigeria we have not succeeded
over the
in
years
achieving this very crucial amenity for economic development. You look at Egypt, for instance. Egypt has 100% access to electricity, not just in the urban areas, in the rural areas. And you want to learn from China. What China did was to translate poverty to prosperity, bringing millions out of poverty to become millionaires by being productive. So if we focus on this and work at it diligently, in less time than expected, I think we should begin to have a new narrative in this excellently blessed Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Excellently blessed.
Our resources are still there. Yeah.
You couldn't have put it better. Excellently blessed. It's just to tap into those resources, those opportunities, and work. Two issues here I want you to address. One is that the vice president said Naira he talked about the Naira. And Naira, as at the last time I checked, I think that was last week, was selling for 1,355 to the dollar in the parallel market, by the way. But Shetima, the vice president, is promising financial, what he calls stability in the financial market, stability in the financial market in the coming weeks. What do you think will be the trump card to achieve this, and can they really achieve that? Because that's causing a lot of upheavals for business people, for companies. And then the second thing is, he also talked about the question of lack of continuity in policy decisions.
Great. You see, Aesop, a wise man, said, after much is said and done, more is said than done. So these promises are brilliant, but how do we get there? Just like when we promised in the last dispensation to give back to the Air Nigeria, and the logo was designed and launched with 2 billion naira, different kinds of flamboyancy around it. At the end of the day, we could not deliver on it. When we talk about this foreign exchange, you need to earn it. You need to be productive. We shouldn't be a consuming nation. And I just mentioned something that is critical, which is energy. Energy is the bedrock of industrialization. When you engage investors in this country, it's such a huge challenge for them. I know of a big bank that reduced the number of working hours, and they close at 3 p.m. because they cannot just run these generators. And so if the government can sit down and say, okay, now, let's take these challenges one by one. We need to reactivate the economy. We need to stop investors that are jetting out of the country. We need to make the people more productive so that we can begin to cut down on importing some of the things we need and export to earn foreign exchange. Then let's face this energy. Let's look at the saboteurs. I've said it, and that's why I came up with the concept of the superstructure. We were just reading recently some allegations around Ajakuta Steel and Mambila projects, and there are some Nigerians who have sworn with their blood and everything to plague this nation and plunder this nation. The government has the paraphernalia of office to go after them. I keep asking, who are the oil thieves that are plundering our resources and creating crisis? So if you don't create the enabling environment, you disable business processes. And what happens? When investors cannot break through, how can they talk about profit? And it's when you have profit that you move to the next level. In public relations, there are 5 basic elements of business. You talk about growth, you talk about survival, you talk about profitability, you talk about employee satisfaction and you talk about corporate social responsibility. So if you don't even have the profit, how do you survive? If you cannot survive and you don't have profit, how do you engage the community? Do you engage the environment, connecting people, business, and the environment? So these are issues. And that's why you find some companies jetting out of the country. So these are issues. How can we help business? How can we help business? Give us energy, work it out. We have all the energy mix in this country. You want to talk about solar, you want to talk about, hydro, all of them are there. But who are the saboteurs that do not want these things to work? So government is not fashion. Government is business. Go out there, strategize on how to engage. You see, and if this is done, we become productive, we can begin to tame the dollars. Dollar is a giant, and in the global business environment, if you don't raise your own giant in terms of productivity and your earning capacity, you just be, winking in the dark. You can see the war between Ukraine and Russia. Russia isn't so much affected, even though the impact of the sanctions from around the world, the impacts are visible. But in terms of the currency of Russia, Russia is standing tall. And that is what we are saying, because that's a productive region. Even in the midst of war, Russia is still supplying wheat and some, oil to some parts of the world. So we need to wake up and smell the coffee in Nigeria. You see, government is not fashion. It's not just about driving around in SUVs and doing commissionings around that. No. It's about making lives meaningful for the people. Democracy has not changed in concept. It's the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So when you make your people productive, when you reduce the number of citizens that are jetting out of this country to have access to healthcare, to education, then you curtail, the flying of the foreign exchange, and you can have more. What has happened to our external reserves? We've been reading about some of the malpractices that went on in central bank.
All right, Jide.
But all this can be put under control with the right political will.
All right, Jide, thank you so much. Abakaba said, what does Tinubu need to do? Make the people happy. Bring rice from where it is to 6,000 and all that. And that's it. Nigerians are easy to govern. Thank you so much for your contributions on This Day Live. Jide Ologun there.